Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our webinar tonight. No matter where you are, it's evening here in the Midwest. I'm in Kansas City. My name is Dr. John Fluke. I'm technology editor and chief dental editor for Dental Products Report. And joining me this evening is my cohort in crime, Dr. Jason Streeter, who is a private practice dentist in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And we're going to talk to you tonight about cloud-based practice management software and why the cloud is an amazing thing for dentistry today and why you probably should be, considering and thinking about the cloud. Tonight, our program is sponsored by Curve Dental, so I'd like to thank them for that, because they've been nice enough to provide the backing that brings all of us together tonight. And also thanks to all of you who've taken your time out of your lives to spend some time with Dr. Streeter and I. But trust me when I say that we are both very humbled by being able to provide this information to you. Normally, when we do a webinar with Viva Learning, we try and leave some time for Q&A, a little housekeeping here before we get rolling. Tonight, we may not have a lot of time for questions because we've got a lot of information that we want to deliver, but we wanted you to know that what we're going to do is have you type your questions into the Q&A area that is located in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. And then what we're going to do is we'll be saving those questions, and Dr. Streeter and I will be answering those via email. Now, it might take us a few days to get through the process, but we will get them answered. So please be patient. What I want you to know is that because I love questions, and I know that Dr. Streeter does too, we want you all to get as much out of this session as possible. So please ask your questions, and rest assured that if you don't get an answer tonight, you will get an answer in a few days as we get to those questions. So with the housekeeping piece of that out of the way, let's get to it. So once upon a time, I love stories. Only when I was a kid, not too many of my stories started with once upon a time. They more started with Dr. Seuss. But back in the early days of computerization in healthcare, computerization and the internet in the late 90s were brand new things. And somebody had a great idea. They said, let's build a computer network in a dental office. And that's going to allow all of the data that dentists are creating to be stored and accessed locally. And it was a great idea because back then, practice management installs were done using floppy disks. 1.44 megabytes of information per disk, and internet connections were on dial-up. So the internet, and this is back, even the very best web pages like Time Magazine and the New York Times, they were pretty much nothing but text. And if there were images, those images took forever to load because we were on, very slow dial-up connections. And the internet of then didn't even remotely resemble the internet of now or the internet of today. When I first started charting, I had a company contact me and they said, hey, we think maybe there might be an opportunity to sell computerized dental charting. What do you think of that? And I thought, I'd always been a geek and I thought it was kind of a good idea. But what I started off with was just a white page, and on the background were the teeth images that we referred to as lollipops, because they were just circles for the crown and a single line for a root, and they actually did kind of look like Tootsie Pops on the screen. That was all we had to chart. And there really wasn't a way to take intraoral photos and keep them electronically. If the office back then had digital x-ray, it was a completely different system that was on a cart. And the cart had a very bulky and ridiculously expensive laptop that the single sensor in the entire office would connect to. And the laptop and those sensors were incredibly expensive. A single sensor and that big bulking laptop, some of which only had a monochrome screen, offices were paying around $30,000 for that. And you could only see those images on the system laptop. So everywhere you went in the office, if you wanted to look at x-rays, that laptop on a cart had to go with you. If you wanted to take an x-ray digitally, somebody go get the cart and wheel the cart with the laptop in here. It was incredibly clunky. Intraoral cameras back then were $15,000. My first intraoral camera was $15,000, and I remember I negotiated really heavily and bought some other supplies along with it, and that got the cost of my first camera down to $13,500. And those images were just live images that you could show, on a screen, once again, on a cart with a camera device and a capture device and a screen, and you would wheel this around and look at these pictures, and people were stunned at the technology. They'd never seen x-rays on a screen before. They'd never seen teeth on a screen before, but everything was expensive and nothing was connected. So utilizing a LAN or a local network for your practice management system was the only real option we had. And it worked for the time. It worked really well, but the world changed. And just like you can't judge a book by its cover, you can't read the first few pages of a book and know what the ending is. So throughout the time that this was going on, things were evolving. Technology evolved, and it continued to evolve and grow. Computers, Moore's law, for those of you that aren't diehard nerds, that says that processing power doubles every 18 months. And that has been true since the 1960s, and it continues to be true today. Computers got better, faster, stronger, more memory, bigger hard drives, and our internet speeds kept increasing and increasing, getting faster and faster and faster. And what happened was these technology evolutions meant that the systems that were state of the art in the 90s and the early 2000s were now becoming antiquated ideas. And what was once state of the art and leading edge was something that people began to sort of take for granted. All this stuff worked, and it worked well, and patients were impressed with it. And that was really all anybody at the time cared about. And it's easy to see why that was. That human beings are creatures of comfort, and we're creatures of habit. We don't really do well with change. I tell people all the time, life is like orthodontics. You can move teeth slowly and gently, and if you move teeth slowly and gently, nothing bad happens and you get a really great result. But if you try and move the teeth fast, you have all kinds of problems. So changes need to be incorporated slowly. And, we resist change, especially changes like broad wholesale changes in the way we run our practices. And the problem becomes for a lot of us is that when a change comes along, oftentimes we say, well, everything's just fine the way it is. Why should I make the change? Or why should I, spend money to make a change? And what I'd like to do is I'm going to tell a brief story here about the keyboard, the QWERTY keyboard that we all use. And I think this does a pretty good job of showing why non-cloud options are still around in dentistry even today. So the story of the QWERTY keyboard is this. If you'll notice in this photo, there's three rows of keys, and the top row of letters next to the tab key is QWERTY. And that's where the term QWERTY keyboard came from, is that those are the first first six letters of that row is QWERTY. And the keyboard wasn't always laid out like this. The keyboard evolved in the early days of typewriters. And I'm talking now in the 1800s, around the 1820s to 1830s. The manual typewriter was invented, and there were lots of different keyboard formats that were tried. But what they found was, if you've ever seen a manual typewriter, when you press the key, mechanically an arm comes up out of the typewriter and it strikes the piece of paper, and that's what makes the letter. So that arm has to come up and strike the paper unimpeded. And what they found was, once people learned the layout of a keyboard, whatever that layout was, when they typed, they got faster once they memorized where the keys were. And as they got faster, oftentimes those mechanical arms would strike each other, and they either wouldn't hit the paper, or sometimes they get stuck together. The arms, there might be 3 or 4 arms all stuck together without hitting the paper, and you would have to stop typing and untangle the arms. It was a mess, very hard to type. And in order to be efficient, we needed to type efficiently. So people did some time and motion studies. And what these experts found was, they moved the most commonly used keys as far apart as possible. And what they did was, by making the keyboard in that design of moving the commonly used keys far apart, it slowed typists down. And the slowing down allowed the arms to strike the paper without getting stuck together. So they limited the skill of the typist by making it hard to type. And because of that, the keyboard that we use now was born. But now, when was the last time you typed on a manual typewriter? We're still using the same technology on a manual typewriter that we used in like 1840. And that was all because of a weakness in technology. But why do we use this keyboard? Because we've always done it that way. That's the way I learned. I don't want to change. That's the way I want to type. There are lots of other keyboard designs in the world, but hardly anybody uses them, because human beings are creatures of habit. The same thing has happened with our practice management systems. Why does somebody build a brand new office with state-of-the-art technology everywhere, and then when it comes to their information management systems, they set up a client-server configuration? I can tell you why they do that, because that's the way we've always done it. And chances are, if the person doesn't have a lot of experience with setting networks up or keeps track of evolutions in technology, I need a client server because I've always had a client server, and everybody knows that's just what you do. But like I said in that previous slide, the world of technology since the day of that client server setup has changed. Technology has changed. Speeds have changed. Our computers have continued to double in processing power every 18 months. And internet speeds are ridiculous. You can download an HD movie in between 2 to 4 minutes now if you've got a high-speed connection. So all the limitations of that client server system have been eliminated. And now a lot of people are moving to the cloud. So real quickly, what is the cloud, and what are the qualities of the cloud? The qualities of a true cloud system. Number one, you can access the software from any browser without any downloads of programs or apps or software, without needing to log into a server, and then connect remotely to your software. A browser-only environment tells you that all of the computing, the security, the data storage, and the backups, those are all happening in the cloud without the user making any intervention at all. Number two, you don't need a server. Cloud-based solutions store everything in the cloud in a really, really incredible data center. It's not in a closet. in somebody's office, or it's not in a server room in your software or IT vendors' offices. If your IT company installs a VPN or virtual private network connection so that you can log in remotely when you're not in your office, that is not a cloud-based practice management system. Third thing, there's always a mechanism to extract your data easily. Fourth thing, cloud-based software is also known as SaaS, or software as a service. And you have to have world-class service wrapped around that software. Customer care, product updates that happen automatically in the background, data security, data backups, your training, those are all included. Any cloud-based solution that is not providing all of these levels is not using your monthly subscription responsibly. And we've got here on this slide, we have some listings of what are some true cloud systems, and then what are not some of your cloud-based systems, just so you can see that and sort of understand the differences. So the cloud offers a lot of advantages, and we're going to address them each as we go through this. I just kind of like to bring this up so that you can see the advantages. There's cost savings. There's tremendously easy to use remote access. Your security needs are all taken care of, and security in today's environment is really, really important. Your backups are all taken care of by, IT professionals that know and verify your backups. There's agnosticism of the system. You don't need to have a certain operating system or a certain device to get into it. And support, you ought to be able to have people available to help you anytime you need help, and it ought to be a high level of help. So let's look now at cost savings, because that's probably the number one thing that when a doctor who's trying to run a business would consider. So what I want you to think about is, first of all, I'm not a person that focuses on money very much. I have a philosophy that if you do the right thing, you provide good care, and you treat your patients and your staff the way you would want to be treated, you'll be successful and you'll make money. If you want to learn how to make $1 million in your first week in practice and retire, I'm not your guy. I love dentistry, I love my patients, and I love what I do. But you can be the best clinician on earth, and if you don't operate your practice at a profit, you can't help anyone, or at least you can't help them very long. And that means it's necessary to make a profit. So any business consultant will tell you that it's important to know what your costs are, and that it's important to keep as many of these costs fixed as possible, because variable costs require constant attention from the business owner, because they move around, they jump around so much, up and down, and you need to be able to keep track of what you're spending. It's much easier to say, I'm going to spend X number of dollars a month on my practice management software than to say, I've got all these variable pieces in here, and 1 month it might be $100 and 1 month it might be $500, but it all kind of depends, and it's difficult to predict. And the thing about IT costs are they're very difficult to predict, not to mention that they are for sure not fixed in most instances. Sometimes you can keep an IT provider on retainer for a fixed amount, but then if anything, requires work, basically what you put them on retainer for is to come to your office as soon as possible. Well, when they come and go to work, in most instances, you're then paying them to do whatever it is they need to do. And when you're thinking about this, if you add into that mix trying to make client server systems run efficiently and predictably in a very busy dental environment where we are, we're so dependent on our technologies now that that part of the equation becomes even more difficult. In today's dental practices, technology needs to work correctly. Software running from the cloud keeps a lot of these problems out of the office, where accidental changes, with a person pushing the wrong thing or typing the wrong thing or accidentally deleting a file or whatever could spell disaster and interrupt your digital workflow, which is what we're all doing now. If you've got a computer in your office, you have a digital workflow. And as you bring more technology into your clinical aspect of things, you're going to have more and more digital workflows. And it's important that these machines and their systems work properly all in that environment so that you can continue to focus on your patients and not be worrying about costs or worrying about your hardware or your software. So when you look at the differences between an on-premise, and this is client server type situation, with a cloud-based system, you need to consider costs that are additional in addition to the software license. You will pay a fee to your software provider for that license. But studies have shown that only about 9% of server-based costs are actually for the software. And that's the reason we did the iceberg slide here for you, is because you don't see a lot of the iceberg. The majority of the iceberg is underwater, and the majority of your costs on a client server system are also things that you don't see right away. You've got things like security. Do you pay for your updates, or do you have to pay a monthly fee to ensure that you get updates? Do you have to pay a monthly fee to not only ensure you get software updates, but there's also another monthly fee that you're required to pay to get support? There's a lot of that. And it adds up. 68% of cloud costs are actually incorporated into the monthly subscription. And that includes support, software updates, the background features, your backups, and disaster recovery. All of that is done for you offsite by the IT professionals that I humorously refer to sometimes as internet elves. These people are working for you in the workshop, and you don't have to do a thing. They do it all for you, unseen, but they do it right, and it works. So in a client server arrangement, the definition in my mind, it's kind of a joke, but the definition of a computer is a beige box under your desk into which you pour money. And a lot of you have probably heard that old joke. A lot of times people will say that when they're talking about boats. But in this case, I really do think that it's true when you think about the costs associated with your network systems versus having a cloud system. So remote access, easy remote access should be first and foremost in a lot of our minds nowadays. We are a mobile society, and we're also a society of instant information and instant gratification. And you need to be able to get to your information quick, efficiently, and you need to be able to do it no matter where you are. So with a cloud-based system, you've got access to everything. You can schedule and reschedule your patients. You can handle billing from the office, from any offsite computer that has an internet connection. It's basically as easy as just setting up a bookmark to your cloud service provider. You click that bookmark in the browser, it goes to that website, and your entire practice is there waiting for you. The ability for patients to complete forms is all done in the cloud, and patients want that. Nobody nowadays walks into a dental office and is thinking to themselves, gosh, I hope they give me a clipboard and a pen, especially in COVID. They don't want to touch anything in the office other than the dental chair. And there's no reason to do any of that paper-based stuff anymore. They can fill this all out, including your COVID questionnaire for every appointment, if you need them to, that can all be done in the cloud. So they can do the check-in, they can do their demographics, they can also do electronic payments from their home, and that minimizes their time in the dental office. That improves their safety, it improves your safety, and it improves the safety of your team, which is especially true in the COVID-19 pandemic environment that we're all dealing with. You don't have any delays downloading data and imaging. Sitting at your desk at home, if a patient calls you on a weekend, unlike remote, log into your server solutions, which can frequently have really sluggish lag times as the signals go through all the different pieces, to get into the office or get into wherever this remote server is and then get back to you. Things load very, very slowly. Not so with a cloud-based solution. You've got a lot more flexibility with the cloud as well. You can do things from home. If you get done for the day and you don't have all your chart notes completed, go home, do them from your desk after supper or after the kids have gone to bed. You want to look at your billing, you want to pay, your bills for the month. You can do all of that from home and just remotely log in. But it's quick, easy, and efficient with the cloud as opposed to these sluggish server-based systems where you have to jump through a bunch of internet hoops to even make the connection. The other thing is with this always on instant gratification society, an emergency is easily handled anywhere. All that patient data is right at your fingertips. From your phone, if it needs to be, you can step outside of a restaurant or wherever you are and have access to everything on your phone that you have on a computer in your office with the right cloud system. So now let's talk about security, because this is a huge, huge piece. And I'm going to linger for a couple of minutes on this slide because right now we live in a world where digital information needs to be closely guarded. This is especially true in healthcare where we have HIPAA. And when HIPAA is involved, we need to be careful. Fines can be crippling. And HIPAA also requires, in some instances, if you have a breach, that you must notify your patients and let them know about it. That can be embarrassing. It can also be bad for business when people are notified that your security is lacking and that their information was taken in some type of a breach. That doesn't bode well for the business aspect of your practice. As dentists, we're experts at taking care of our patients. But when you're talking about electronic things like ransomware, we're up against cyber criminals. And that's their whole focus. Our focus is patients and their dentition and their oral health and how that relates to their overall health. And we're battling people whose whole lives revolve around making malware that steals data from our offices. So they're the experts at that aspect of it. So it's difficult when we're not experts at security, but we're expected to be experts in security to protect our data. Now, I do a lot of work with Dental Products Report as their technology editor. And because of that, I'm probably more of a security hound than a lot of people are. But I do a lot of security research. I read a lot of web pages. I have a lot of Google alerts set for all kinds of things like this. And I can tell you that almost daily, I see stories of major healthcare organizations that have either had data stolen or they're paying huge amounts of money to hackers to have their data unencrypted. And for my money, I'd much rather put my money and my trust in a company that is constantly and vigilantly watching over and protecting my data than to kind of wing it as a dentist who's trying to protect his or her practice. fighting the hackers. Now, you still need to be aware of security in your office, even with a good cloud-based system. But the security of your patient data will never be in doubt. You will never have to have the fear of a virus, erasing hard drives and wiping out all your patient data. You'll never have to worry that ransomware encrypted your patient records and it's going to cost you thousands of dollars to hackers somewhere to get a passphrase that will unlock your data, if you can, even after you pay, get the passphrase, and if that passphrase even works. Oftentimes people get hit with ransomware, they pay the ransom, and they never get the way to unencrypt the data back from the ransomware people, or even if they do, the software is poorly written and it doesn't unencrypt, and you're now out a bunch of money to the hackers, and you still don't have your data, and you've still got a breach. So you don't have to worry about that when you've got IT professionals and a good cloud-based system. I tell people all the time, think about this like online banking. No one calls it cloud banking, but they should. If we're going to call what we do with dentistry cloud-based practice management, we really should call it cloud banking, because that's exactly what's going on. And when you think about it, when was the last time that you worried about a virus on your computer wiping out all your banking information? Or when was the last time that you were worried that you might accidentally click the mouse in the wrong spot and delete a massive amount of your banking information? You don't think about that, because those IT professionals that are running your bank's cloud-based system are on the case for you. I took a tour of a cloud-based system, or I'm sorry, of a cloud data center a while back, and they were explaining all their defensive procedures, and I was stunned when they were telling me about fuel allocation. Now, in case of a disaster and electricity is lost to a data center or to a major metropolitan area, data centers then operate on these big emergency diesel generators. And the people at this data center told me that if that happens, when the fuel arrives, and there are processes in place to make sure, emergency fuel arrives to big cities to keep them running with their infrastructure, number one that gets fuel is hospitals. Number two is the first responders and the airports. And the number three in line is the data centers. And that should tell you right now how important these data centers are to our lives. It's incredibly important. Backups are kind of a similar situation. Most of us are currently backing up to the cloud right now anyway. But as my career as a technology evangelist, I've received a lot of contacts from offices who thought their backup was set up correctly, that it was even set up by, like their IT guy that they use locally. But when disaster struck, they found out that the system hadn't been backing up at all. It's either backing up empty folders or it's backing up the wrong files. And suddenly they've lost their data and they're in the soup, and they're calling me saying, John, what do you think we should do? And that's a difficult conversation to have. Remember the banking example I gave you on this previous slide. Think about this. Not only with banking, when was the last time you backed up your Google Mail or your Yahoo Mail or your Google Maps? When was the last time you backed up your photos on your phone or your contacts on your phone? Chances are that answer is zero, because the IT people at all of those big companies are performing cloud backups for you. And that's the gist of this whole thing, is you don't have to worry about doing those backups, because those backups are done for you. Think about this. It's not only backed up in the cloud, but your information is backed up in the cloud redundantly. And what I mean by that is your data is replaced and housed on multiple drives in multiple secure data centers. So if there is some type of a disaster, a flood, a fire, a hurricane, in my neck of the woods, a tornado, your data is saved in a data center that is nowhere near the area of the disaster. And it's sitting there waiting for you, all safe and sound, with no effort required on your part, waiting for you to log back in and contact your patients. Backup in a cloud-based system is just that simple. One of the other advantages is agnosticism, and that's a good thing in technology. The cloud doesn't care where, how, or what you're connecting with. All it cares about is that you are connecting, and that's what should matter to you as well. Your management software should simply do what you want it to do. You should make demands on your software, but your software should not make demands on you. Unfortunately, we've all gotten so used to bending to this client-server relationship and its weaknesses, we've forgotten that the technology exists to work for us and not the other way around. Let's talk about support for a second. There is no need for a practice to replicate a problem if you have some type of a glitch in the matrix and you're not getting something, or something isn't working the way it should. This typically means much faster resolution, which to a busy office is a significant benefit. You don't have to determine if the issue is with your hardware, since there's really no hardware to troubleshoot. Most cloud solutions have support on call, which means faster response times. They offer multiple ways to contact them, so that whether your office wants to do it via phone, text, a chat client, or whatever, it's easier on staff, and the problems are solved quickly and efficiently. I have, in a server-based world, actually gone and spoken to one of my employees who I needed help in a situation. I was told, I can't help you right now because I've been on hold 30 minutes and I'm the next one in the queue to get my problem solved. And that's crazy in the dental environment that we all work in, that's so incredibly busy. One of the other things that really, really bothers me is the problem we face with dental software that I refer to as info creep. And you could also call it app creep. And here's what I mean by that. As our technology and our data grows, we're finding new and better ways to take the data we have in our practices and process it. And it gives us the ability to see things from a numbers standpoint that we haven't been able to see before. And data mining is a really big deal in most big corporations, and it really should be a big deal to dentists as well. But the unfortunate part of this is that the code that you're running when you're running one of these antiquated client-server relationships, this code is so old. The large corporations bought these. Most of these big companies that we're using were purchased in the early 2000s during the internet gold rush. And those companies don't see revenue opportunities by updating their software because everybody's using software. When somebody changes from one software company to another nowadays, those companies are swapping clients. For every person that's dropping company one and going with company two, somebody's dropping company two and going to company one. So the revenue just isn't there anymore. And that means that they aren't spending time, effort, and resources in rewriting or redesigning this code. So what happens is there are opportunities for data mining, but it's being done by new companies that are small and nimble, and they've written code in streamlined languages that does this data mining. But the bad part is that these companies need to make a profit, and so they sell all these add-on services for a monthly fee. And instead of your practice management system being nimble and scalable, the doctor's forced to pay monthly fees, and we add on, I need this, it's $200 a month. I want my software to tell me this, that's $200 a month. I'd like this, $200 a month. And before long, all those it's only little fees begin to add up to a really big number that affects your profitability. But what would it be like if your practice management system was upgradable completely in the background when you weren't using it at night, and it provided you all of that information without having that it's only aspect? That would be an incredible thing. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what the cloud allows us to do. So at this point, I'd like to bring in Dr. Jason Streeter. And Jason, he's the real star of this webinar. You've heard me drone on for about 40 minutes now. Jason is going to tell us some things from his experience. He's a general dentist, and he owns a private practice in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And he offered to discuss his transition from a server-based world to a cloud-based world. And I want to pick his brain and have him explain why a cloud-based system is so important to him. So, Jason, thanks for joining me tonight for this.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for that introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. I've come up with some questions, and for those of you that are watching, I've just put the questions up on the screen so that as Jason answers them, you can review them and actually, keep up with us. So the first question, Jason, is tell us, you purchased a practice that was running Dentrix in a server workstation configuration, and you decided to make the jump to the cloud. So what were the main factors that led you to focus your search on cloud-based solutions as opposed to looking for a different client server type situation?
Yeah, so like you said, I bought a practice and immediately started digging in and figuring out what was going on with our patient charts, records, everything else. And Dentrix was the software. And I'm not here to talk about Dentrix or in any way it's a great software. It's a very robust software that's been around for 30 years. But I was frustrated with a few things. For example, I bought the practice and I took over that maintenance fee to get support from Dentrix and to get updates and everything else. And I noticed that I was about 5 years behind on my updates. So I called up Dentrix. I said, hey, I want to go up to G7. I'm way behind. Why hasn't this happened? They said, you can't. Your hardware you need to replace all of your hardware. The operating systems on your workstations and on your server are not new enough for us even to bring you up to date in the first place. So that, of course, was very frustrating to hear. So I immediately replaced 6 workstations and a server. I spent thousands of dollars doing that. And then we spent a whole bunch of time with tech support getting everything up to date. And I was like, okay, this is going to be great. Dentrix is going to be flying on these computers I bought, and my troubles are going to be solved. But even after all of that, I was surprised to learn that there weren't that many changes. A lot of the things that I was hoping to gain by upgrading and by spending all that money didn't happen. It still wasn't very fast, despite the updated hardware that I did. I still wanted like you said, some of these third parties are offering really great data analysis where you can get beautiful pie charts and look at your profitability and your accounts receivable and anything else under the sun. I wanted that, and that wasn't there. I wanted some updated communications, like a Lighthouse type system. And I was hoping that would have been integrated, and it wasn't there. I mean, and again, I'm not trying to be rude, but like nothing changed after I did all that work. And I was really disappointed about that. And I was looking at spending, hundreds more to add on these third-party things and then still not have everything I wanted. One of the things that I got this distinct feeling with these softwares that have been around for 30 years is that they bought up other companies and added things in a modular way over time. It's like, okay, we need to add this, we need to add this, and it's all very separate. You've got your patient records, but if you want to make a phone call, you need to click and load up I think they call it family records, some other little button, and wait for that to come up. If you want to look at something that you scanned in, you're clicking another thing, and it's like loading different apps at the bottom of your, or different softwares, basically, at the bottom of your screen, and that takes time. And it even asks, like, if you go to close a perio chart, it's like, are you sure you really want to do that? Because it's going to take forever to load it up again. And you're like, oh yeah, that's right. And so it's slow. And that may not be true for all of them. I'm just speaking of my experience with Dentrix, which is one of the main ones, but I found it to be fairly slow and outdated in many ways. And for example, with Recare, I was trying to access all these charts to figure out, or reports to figure out what was going on with the practice. I just bought it. How are we doing on our Recare? What else is going on? And it's like you find the chart that you want and you go to click on it, and instead of just bringing it up, it puts it in a queue. It spends like, I don't know, it could be 10, 15 minutes getting it ready. And then you can either print it physically or like click some other button to show it on the screen. It was all very 1990s. I was like, seriously, I just want to see the data and I want it now. And I don't want to print it out and then try to work through some paper chart. I thought it was crazy. And so those were some of the factors. The other factor was, patient security. And I wasn't super worried about this, but it was on the back of my mind. I had paper charts. I had data on the server in my office. I had data on probably on each of these workstations. I don't know exactly how that was all being handled. And then I also was paying for the eSync backup. So then my data was going to some server offsite anyway, which we're required to do. So it was just like data everywhere. And I didn't like that. I didn't know if my backups were being handled properly. I'm kind of saying a lot of the things that you said, but this was a real situation in my office. And so I started looking at cloud and I was like, you know what, that would be nice if it was all just on somebody else's server, preferably like Amazon server that they spend billions of dollars on anyway, in the first place. So that was a big thing. And then the last thing was remote access. And I'm going to touch on this. I think there's another question that has something to do with this, but we get bomb cyclones here in Colorado. We get all kinds of crazy stuff. And in those situations, I remember my staff member saying, it might snow tomorrow. Do you want us to print out the schedule and get all these patient phone numbers so that we can call them if that happens? Or I'd be at home trying to access things through TeamViewer or some kind of remote access thing like that. Which is a good, that's a good software, but what if your computer did a Windows update and now it didn't start TeamViewer and you can't get on? Or what if the power cut out and your computer's not even on in the first place? So there were a lot of these little irritations like that to get to my data. Or if a patient called and I didn't have their x-rays in front of me or something like that. Oh, and that's another thing. The x-ray software was a separate software, and I was bridging between all these softwares. It was, and so basically that's the long-winded answer to why I started looking for a cloud-based solution.
Well, and one of the things that you brought up, Jason, which I think is really important, and I didn't bring this up before tonight, was that not only are you backing up and you're backing up your data, but then you've got this whole thing of you've got to make sure that you're backing everything else up. And you could be backing up all your financial data, but then you forgot that you have a separate program that you use for radiography, and suddenly you have a crash and you have all your chart notes and your patient data, and that's fine, but you've lost every x-ray you've ever taken, and that is huge too. And so every time you add something, then you have to go back and think, okay, how do I back that up? Which is, can be a real pain. And I'm glad you brought that up because that is important. How did your cloud-based solution help you deal with the last year? Because heaven knows there's been a lot of changes in the last year. So how did that help you with that?
Well, I mean, it's basically the second COVID hit, all of a sudden I'm getting all these emails from marketers and stuff. Oh, we're going to help you with your teledentistry. But that wasn't an issue because exactly like you said, I can log into my software from a browser at home and I have it all in front of me, all the x-rays, all the notes, everything I've ever scanned in. And so that was very helpful with talking to patients, and they'd say, well, this crown is off. And I go on and like, okay, it's been root canal treated. You're fine. We can push that till after COVID, as opposed to asking them, has it been root canal treated? Like, and I guess they would tell you if they're in pain. But anyway, it's all right in front of me. So it was very helpful for that, for teledentistry. It was very helpful for my staff members to be able to log in from their own homes during that home thing and handle the scheduling, rescheduling, which we had to do a lot of because we thought we were going to get open back up, and then the governor pushed us back. So we're calling everyone again, like, hey, sorry, we got to push that back. So, I mean, that's the obvious answer. It's all right in front of us. Very, very easy. And then it's also helpful for other emergencies. Like I already mentioned, snowstorms, things like that. People might be worried, well, what if the cloud goes down? The software that I'm using, which is Curve Hero, particularly, I've never had it go down. They've done some maintenance at like 3 a.m, and they send out a little message, hey, we're going to do maintenance tonight, something like that. I've never had it go down. The only issue I've ever had was my internet went down in my office at one point, which obviously is a huge issue. But I was able to kind of rig it up, like, and use my cell phone data to create, what do they call that? A local like internet hotspot. And then log in and do some things. It was a little limited. So I'm actually kind of exploring like that contingency. Do I get some kind of like data from Verizon in case of that? But that only happened once in the 2 years I've used this, versus all the other types of issues I've had. I still have a server for my milling machine, and that sends the like 1-day crowns over to it. And I had an issue just the other day. So of course I had to call up tech support when I had a minute and wait and blah, blah, blah. And the first thing he asked was like, well, have you had any Windows updates? And sure enough, it was a Windows update that shut off something that we needed for that to work. So, as far as reliability and being able to access this, it's been fantastic.
So let's look at one of the things that I tried to cover a little bit with what businesses refer to as TCO or total cost of ownership. What factors on that went into your equation?
Well, obviously, I spent thousands upgrading everything beforehand.
Right.
So that was that, which wasn't a bad thing. I mean, my computers are faster, but if you're looking at the cloud, suddenly you have a very different software need. Instead of looking at RAM and hard drive space and blah, 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 it's like literally, can this thing access the internet really well? and so your hardware needs change. So that was a big cost. But I don't have any IT consultants like staff that I need. And it's a small office anyway, but I don't have to call people for that kind of thing nearly as often. So that's huge. Maintenance, downtime for maintenance. I just talked about that. That's huge. I mean, that's so costly when you're down. You can't give patients what they need, because of software issues. That's incredibly frustrating. I was paying for e-backup, which I'm not paying for anymore. And I was considering paying for a bunch of third-party add-ons, which is built in with, at least with this software that I'm using, that's built in. The x-rays are directly in the software, so I'm not using any third-party anything for that, which is super nice. The backups there. I've got a bunch of, they just introduced two-way chat through text with my patients. So I've got a whole bunch of patient communication options that I didn't have before that I really wanted. So there's a lot of savings there. And then some things that I think are harder to really quantify, but I'll just throw this out as an example. Like I said, I was trying to figure out my practice. I really was. And you could say it's my own fault for not knowing Dentrix as well as I needed to, but I was, as soon as I switched over my software and got everything transferred, and I started digging through the reports, it's beautiful. It's like cloud. It's like these pie charts, and everything looks really nice. You can look at all this. I found out immediately that I had I think it was like 400 people overdue for their recare that we could start calling immediately. I was like, are you kidding me?
That's huge.
And you could say, yeah, you should have known that. And I should have, but the data wasn't in front of me, and I was trying to do all this other stuff, and I just didn't see it. And so that alone, as long as your cloud software has that, and most of these are going to, because they're, like you said, they're more robust and light, and they're building this all in. That's huge money to me. And then the other thing is just everyday personnel stuff. I talked about how slow it is to do all these little things. You're opening this up, opening that up. With the cloud software that I use, literally every task is faster, whether it's calling someone, handling their billing, pulling up their notes, looking up something that was done, that we scanned in some old records and talking about that. Every single click, every single task is faster and more efficient, and loads faster. And so it time is money. We're working faster that way, and I can do more with less staff members. Maybe your office could use one person up front handling a certain number of tasks versus having to bring in someone separate. And so personnel is the biggest cost we have, obviously. So that's kind of a hidden cost and a hidden saving from going to something that's so much faster and so much more efficient.
Well, and nowadays, I think too, with dealing with COVID, when you have a situation of, now I've got a large staff that I've built up over the years, but we had somebody who had to quarantine. Thank goodness they didn't. They never, showed up positive, but they had to quarantine for 14 days. And when that kind of thing happens, the ability, if it's a person, like an admin team member, if they're not sick, they can just work almost as well from home as they can in the office. There's just nothing that slows them down. They can sit right there and do everything almost that they were doing, and the thing is, you're going to pay them anyway. So a lot of people have. I've heard a lot of people say that gosh, I can work just fine from home. And if you've got a dental employee that does that, I think that's a great advantage as well.
I'm seeing that. I mean, I don't have someone remotely handling billing, but it would be super easy because I can handle the permissions. I can set the times that they can log in or to their login, and everything's tracked by who logs in. I can set what they can see and what they can't see. So I could have remote billing. I could have remote claims. I could have a person doing that with just a login like any other employee. So very easy there. But I'm also seeing my employees saying, hey, can I finish up my notes at home? And it's like, yeah, no problem, because I already know what they're going to have access to. And we're not setting up something like TeamViewer that makes me a little bit worried about what they might be up to.
Sure.
It's all very controlled. And I'm like, sure, finish your notes at home. I'd rather you do that than wait and potentially forget something anyway.
Right.
Or today, actually, today's my day off. I do a bunch of admin stuff today and so forth. And I noticed on my email, I had like 10 or 15 voicemails. They kind of get transcribed. And so I sent a text to my front desk person and I said, hey, we've got a ton of voicemails today. I don't know if they're important or not, but if you wouldn't mind clocking a few more hours, would you jump on and respond to these? And so she's able to do a lot of these things from home if we feel the need to do that. So we're kind of in this more flexible state now where it's not a big deal to jump on and do some of that remote stuff, even if that's not a dedicated thing.
That's awesome. So we're starting to bump up against the top of the hour when we're supposed to wrap up. So let me ask you the last question here. What are the top things that you would look for when you're evaluating a cloud-based system for your office?
Yeah, and I'll try to make this quick, but actually I think this is one of the most important things that I can talk about, especially if our attendees are hopefully, you're starting to think hard about this, and that can be stressful, going from any software to anything else. It just can be a huge headache and
Absolutely.
Very stressful. And so I've been on this for 2 years, and I went back and I thought about the things that I did right, hopefully, and the things that are super important. And I would say the first thing that you should look for as you look, and it's really easy to look up a list of what are the cloud dental management tools, and here's the top 10. You got Tab 32, Denticon, Dentrix, Curve, CareStack, NextHealth. That's really easy. But then you start to dig into, well, okay, which one would I actually want to switch to? And so I put together 6 things that I think are huge, and I'm going to cruise through those.
Okay.
One is data conversion. Can they get your data
Yep.
into the cloud without losing it or screwing it up?
Exactly.
And that's going to be obviously the first thing. And that's true of any switch, because if they screw that up, it's just a nightmare. Or if they tell you like, well, we can convert all of this stuff, but you're going to have to do X, Y, and Z manually. Now you're talking about hundreds of man hours potentially. So the very first thing I would look at is, how are they going to handle that data conversion? And are you going to have an issue? And I didn't have an issue going from Dentrix to Curve. Thankfully, it took a long time, but it wasn't like a big problem. I wasn't doing man hours. They were just converting it in the background and then bringing it. It was all fine. But that's so big. I would look at that. The next thing I would look at is to make sure that it's a complete practice management software. A lot of these are very new. And as I was searching, I almost got the feeling like they were just popping out like almost like a new app. Like, here's your dental software light version.
Right.
And it was like a light version of their more robust server software. And that's not what I wanted. I don't want your applet or something that syncs with the server software. I want this to be everything I need online, click in and log in.
Yeah, you want the equivalent. You don't want the light version.
Yeah, you want it to be able to handle every function that you're going to have, charting, billing, everything like that. You don't want to go back and be like, oh, great, I can't do this thing now. And so that's huge. And one thing that I noticed that I'm seeing a lot of rollouts on Curve, which I think it doesn't apply to me, but I do think it could apply to a ton of you, is they're rolling out a lot of features right now to make sure that people with multiple clinics can easily handle multiple clinics, or scheduling, having different staff members working at these different clinics, things like that. So that doesn't apply to me, but that could be a huge thing. So does it have everything you need to handle your practice or even multiple practices? Number 3, data security. We already talked about this, but I think a lot of dentists out there are really worried, like, okay, the cloud is supposedly more secure, but is it really? I heard about such and such a hospital getting broken into, blah, 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 blah. So just because it's cloud, I would recommend you still look and see, like, where is this actually being secured? And, I feel pretty good about it. My software is on Amazon's AWS servers, and they've spent billions of dollars and they have huge clients. I would way rather they handle that security than me in my office. So I feel pretty good about that, but ask about that. Number 4, user interface. Most of these are going to have a demo. And if you think that it's going to be a good one for you, take the time to do the demo and actually look at the interface, make sure that it's going to be something that you like. I really like the one I'm using. It's very clean. It's very easy. And staff, come in and they're not trained on this stuff. They're trained on EagleSoft and Dentrix, obviously, or hopefully. And so they always are like, wait, what's this software? But the interface is so easy that training only takes a couple of days. It's actually a lot easier than Dentrix. There's not like a million little like buttons you have to figure out, well, what does this little symbol actually mean?
Right.
So do a demo, check out the user interface, make sure you're going to like it, and take your time on that. And then continued investment. I was a little worried about, all of these cloud softwares are popping up for good reason. This is the whole point of our discussion today, is that now's a great time to go cloud. And there's a ton of people jumping on that and creating the software, which is cool. But I was a little worried, like, okay, but if I go through all this headache to get switched over, what if they just don't get enough users and it just kind of fizzles out or something like that? What if there's no long-term support? That could obviously be a big problem. So I would ask questions like, what updates have been made recently? What's in your pipeline? Have you had who's the parent company of this thing?
How many users do you have?
Yeah. Something to try and to make you comfortable that this is not just something that's going to fizzle out if it doesn't work for them in the long term. Obviously, Dentrix Ascend, I think you've got Dentrix backing that. So that might, I don't use that one, but those kinds of things might be something that you look at. And last of all, the customer support, how you know, if you call in to get support on this, are you going to get a real person? Are you going to get somebody that speaks your language? Are they going to be responsive and quick? What are they going to charge you to train new hires? Because obviously, as you get new people coming in, again, they're probably not going to be trained on this software yet. And you're like, training my assistants is super easy, but training a new insurance coordinator is not something that I wanted to handle. And it was really nice with Curve. I called them up, said, hey, I've got a new insurance coordinator. And they set up a couple hours and ran through everything with her.
Nice.
And I didn't have to mess with that. And that was really nice. So that's kind of my top list. Can they handle the data conversion? Is it a complete software management? Where are they securing your data? Obviously, what does the interface look like? And is this thing going to be around for the long term? And what's the customer support? So, you know, that's my 2 cents on that.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks again to Curve for sponsoring. And once again, thanks to all of you who attended tonight. We're very grateful. We actually ran over by a bit. We're sorry about that, but it's a really important subject. And we think, you know, that there's nothing you know, more important than how you manage your practice. That is a huge thing nowadays that you've got to look at. And I hope we brought up, you know, the right things that helped motivate some of you when you're thinking about this. Is that, you know, this is something that's now. We're not talking about things that, you know, are going to happen, you know, in the future. We're actually dealing with things that are real and now. And there's no reason, you know, why this isn't the perfect time to make the jump. The days of the client server system are numbered, if not over. So thank you guys very much. We're grateful for you tuning in tonight. And we will, as I said when we started, in case you weren't here for the very opening, we will be taking your questions that you've typed into the Q&A box, and Jason and I will be able to you know, review those, and then we'll email you back the answers. So hopefully you'll get even more out of this than you have already. So thank you guys very much. Grateful for you showing up, and have a great evening.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.